Um, it's not what you get, it's what you give. And we have, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what goes on in your life, you have two incredible, powerful tools always at your hand.
My guest today is David Parker. He is a retired registered nurse where he worked in high risk OB, high risk labor and delivery, charge RN for a 55-bed AIDS patient unit in the early 1990s, a hospice RN for 17 years at a 10-bed inpatient unit, including 5 years of inpatient pediatric hospice. Later, he worked 5 years in a pediatric burn center and 20 years level 1 trauma ER. During his hospice career, he was bedside for over 3,600 deaths. David experienced his own near death as a child and later as a nurse had many shared death experiences with his patients. David has recently started a YouTube channel sharing spirit encounter stories he's had over his life with his patients and shares the story of the death of his two small sons that died in a car accident and returned a year later to give him the lesson of a lifetime. David, you have an impressive career helping others and many amazing experiences. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
The pleasure is all mine. My viewers, they are interested in near death experiences. Would you like to start by telling us about yours?
Sure. Mine happened, I was a child. I was raised by my grandmother out in the middle of nowhere in southern Ohio. We had no indoor plumbing, chickens in the yard. To go to the restroom, you had to go out the back door, across the yard, down a hill to a wooden outhouse. Out, yeah, totally isolated. And around 5 or 6 years old, I had developed a fungal infection in my lungs. And I spent off and on for about a year and a half at the local children's hospital. And yeah, I had a near death experience while I was there. I had multiple out of body experiences, but this one I was actually coded. Um, I simply felt like I got up out of the bed and I started walking down the hallway. And as I walked down the hallway, the hospital was very old and it had huge ceilings and wide hallways. It was a big ornate building. And as I was going down the hallway, there was like what looked like a ball of people, maybe a couple hundred, and they were adults. Uh, I understood later that the hospital ground used to be an adult hospital. And they looked like pen and ink drawings, outlines. And then the inside was white, and they were swirling around each other. There was no gap between their bodies. It was arms going in and heads coming out and legs and swirling. And then as the face would come out, it would like stretch and the mouth would unnaturally would stretch wide open. And they looked miserable. I don't know if they were or not. I didn't feel any connection with them. I didn't feel like they were trying to communicate with me. I just stood there and watched them, though I was out of the body too. And they swirl in and out in a huge ball. There had to be maybe 400 or 500 of them, and it a perfectly round globe, and it stayed within. It was confined in this space of the hallway where I was walking. The hall, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 feet tall. It was a huge old building. And I kept watching and watching this, and I thought, what's going on? And I could see people walking through them, the doctors, the other patients being pushed through, and they didn't see me, and the people walking around doing their everyday tasks couldn't see me, and they couldn't see this ball of people. And I'm just standing there thinking, what on earth is it? And pretty soon this little girl comes up to me, about my size. So, I'm 5, 6 years old at the time, maybe seven. No, about 5 or 6. And she was dark complected, had her hair pulled back, and it was braided into this huge, thick braid, perfect braid going down her back, just running like a little pinafore, smiling, huge smile. And she said, "Well, let's go play. Come on, let's go play." So we go outside and we're playing. And there was a maypole, and I had never seen a maypole in my life. And finally, I had to ask my mom, "What's this thing that you do?" People hadn't done that in ages. But anyway, we were playing, and then she looked up to me and she says, "Well, you can play just a little bit longer, but you can't stay here." And I think, why can't I? And it's like, you have to go back. And she says, "My name is Penny." And instinctively, without her saying anything, I knew who her mother was. Her mother was one of the nurses that was taking care of me, and at the children's hospital. And she says, "Tell my mom I love her." Oh, sure, sure, I'll do that. And we played a little bit longer, and the next thing I knew, I'm back in my bed. And back then we didn't have we had oxygen tents. It didn't have the little nasal prongs that go in your nose, and I was surrounded by plastic and to help me breathe because of my fungal infection in my lungs. I just couldn't breathe. And um, there people are all around me and working on me, and everything was fine after that. This woman came up, the nurse, and was working on me, and I said, "I just saw Penny," and Penny said to tell you that she loved you. This woman just looked in horror, and ended up she quit on the spot. I guess I freaked her out so much. My mom later told me that she quit, and whatever for whatever whatever reason, I met her daughter and I gave her the message that her daughter wanted her to have. And I hope that over time that brought her comfort. I hope I didn't cause a whole lot of trouble, but we never saw her again. I was back in the hospital a few other times after that, and finally I got over the infection. I never saw the mother again, but that was my near death experience. It wasn't more about me. It was more about seeing whatever these beings were in the hallway and seeing Penny. I can see her face right now. What a charming little girl she was. And anyway, that was my message that I gave her mother.
When you saw the people, the adults, and they
Yeah.
were kind of all twisted up, and their voice or their faces looked like they were
Mhm.
in pain, correct?
Right. It looked it. I don't know if they were in pain, but they just were stretched, and their arms and legs and rear ends and feet and hands, and it was constant swirling. I remember a couple times as a kid on the farm where we would come into a ball of snakes. I don't know what snakes are doing like that, but there'd be 10, 15 of them and all swirling around. It looked exactly like that, and it was completely round sphere of them. And how deep it was, I don't know. But it went from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, and other people were walking right through it. And the interesting thing is, I later became a nurse, and now 6 other times, not as a patient, but as a nurse, and awake and up and standing upright and on my job, I saw the exact same thing. I saw it 5 times in different hospitals and once in one of our hospice inpatient units, exactly as I saw it as a child. And so it was a total of 7 times I saw this, once out of the body in my near death experience, and 6 times as a nurse working. And it was exactly the same. This swirling sphere of body parts, and the heads would stretch. The mouth would ungodly stretch open. It looked miserable. What was it? I have absolutely no idea. And for years, I worked night shift. I would see it several times on night shift. I worked day shift. Um, The time that it happened when I was in our 10-bed hospice inpatient unit, I was working day shift. We had a little break room, and I was there with a friend, and one whole side of the wall was sliding glass windows, so we had lots of daylight coming through, and a Pepsi machine and a sofa, and we were just sitting there talking, and there it happened again. And this was a tiny room, a regular 10-foot room, and there was the ball of people, again 10 feet tall, fit in that room perfectly and swirling. And I told my friend, "Do you see this? Do you see this?" And he didn't see it. And visitors walking right through them, they didn't see it at all. I have no idea what it is. I have no idea if people are trapped. I don't know if they're as miserable as they look, but this has happened 7 times.
Do you think it's symbolic for something, possibly? Is there a meaning that you could extract from the vision?
Um, I wonder, and I've seen many, many, many spirits, especially working hospice, where people are right on that edge. We, when I was a hospice nurse, we averaged 3 deaths a shift. People didn't last long. So, was it that energy? It was weird. I only saw this in healthcare facilities, and the 20 years I worked in the emergency room, I never saw it there. But then we were so busy, and we had such kinetic energy with, as soon as we got one person, stabilized, we had more coming in. We didn't have a whole lot of time to be kind of open to spiritual forces. I saw them in hospitals. One hospital where I worked, I was heading to a staff meeting, and it was an old hospital and huge, huge ceilings. And I was just getting ready to go into the staff meeting, and there they were. And I couldn't take my eyes off of them. I don't know what it was. And it was right outside the room where I was supposed to be in my staff meeting. And I'm staring at him. And then my boss comes out and says, "Get in here. You're missing the meeting." And I just stood there. I couldn't take my eyes off. I ended up like 30 minutes. And she kept coming out, "Okay, you're missing it. You're missing it." And finally, she gave up on me. And, I don't know what I was doing. It was just swirling outlines, clear as day. I couldn't see through them, but people were walking through in the hallways. People were walking right through it, not seeing it all. Um, Dark outlines, pen and ink, and then painted like solid white on the inside. Again and again and again, that's happened throughout my life. Um, I have no clue, absolutely no clue what it
It
is.
must have some meaning specific for you because you keep seeing it. And it's like your near death experience possibly opened a portal or a doorway in the dimensions for you to view this. Do you feel like that?
I wonder, even before that, when I living with my grandmother, every now and then my grandmother would say, "They're coming, they're coming, get ready." And I thought, okay, so that means I had to go get on the swing on the front porch. And my grandmother, would put her teeth in and comb her hair and, put a little lipstick on, make herself look presentable. And she'd hurry up and get on the front porch. And we'd sit there and swing. And we were halfway down a hill. It was a gravel road. And then there was another hill. And within minutes of my grandmother sitting down, we would hear people walking down the hill, kicking up the gravel stones as they're walking. And here would come about 30 Civil War soldiers dressed in blue, young boys. Most of them were very young, teenagers, early 20s, um, disheveled. Their uniforms were torn up. Um, Old boots. Some had guns, most of them didn't. And they would come down the hill and walk in front of our house, and then finish down the hill, and then go behind the barn, and then up over the next hill and disappear. And they would talk to themselves, each other. You could hear them talking clear as a bell. And they were absolutely 100% solid. But for some reason, I couldn't hear what they were saying. And several times I would go up to the side of the road. I was lonesome. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, me and a 70-year-old lady with chickens and cows. That was my playmates as a kid. And I want to talk to him. I said, we got some peanut butter, come inside. And, we got one TV channel when I was a child. You come watch TV. I was lonesome. I wanted them to talk to me and play with me. And they didn't respond, and I could clearly see their faces. I could see a couple now. If I could draw their faces perfectly, and their uniforms were torn, and some were shot up, and their boots were all curled up where they had been wet and dried, and they would just disappear. And then once they disappeared, my grandma would say, let's go have some supper. This happened like 50 times over a couple of years. And almost every single time she knew when they were coming. And it was just common. I didn't think anything of it. I wish now I had asked some questions. But years and years later, I was watching a documentary on the Civil War. And it was interesting. After the war, the horses were shot, the roads were torn up, trains were blown up. There was no way to get the soldiers back home, so they had to walk, and some had to walk hundreds or maybe 1,000 miles to get home. And it said that on this documentary that many of the soldiers that survived the war did not survive the walk home. And I always wondered, were those soldier boys trying to get home? Still, it was nearly 100 years after the Civil War when I was a little boy and saw them. And I've never been back there since. I'm planning to go back this summer, first time in 60 years.
Wow. So it sounds like you were born with many gifts and it runs in the family.
It
And
does. We talked about this openly. Our whole family did. My grandmother was born in 1889, and she had many spirit stories. It was just common. So did my parents. My mom saw them. My dad saw them, and we just commonly spoke about it. I never had it ridiculed out of me. And I know some people have some experiences and they're afraid to share it. And we would just sit around the table and talk about it. So it was a wonderful way to grow up. You know?
yeah.
So
And you worked as a hospice nurse for many years. I know that's a difficult job, so thank you so much for doing
yeah,
that. That's such an important service to our communities.
yeah.
And you experienced several shared death experiences as well while you were a hospice nurse. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. I started out as a very technical nurse. It's interesting. My grandmother was a nurse during the Spanish flu of 1917, 1819, which wiped out millions of people back then. And I just recently realized 100 years later, I was a nurse during COVID. You know, it was almost the same thing, 100 years apart, and I didn't realize I followed in her footsteps as a nurse. So I was working in the emergency room during COVID, and then now I'm retired. I had one amazing. I had many amazing experiences with my terminally ill patients, adults and children. And it's interesting that the children saw something totally different than what adults did as they were going through the dying process, at least the ones that could communicate and would share with me. But I had this one lady, such a cool story. I don't know, there was something about her. And I didn't know who she was. I never met her before. But even when I was driving to work, I just had this good feeling like there's a good buddy there. I'm going to have a good experience. So I get to work. She had been admitted the shift before I got there. She was comatose. She was in her 70s. She was non-responsive. Like many of our patients, our average life expectancy was 72 hours on our patients. And as soon as the bed emptied, as soon as we had a death, we had a waiting list for more to come in. It was just a steady flow. of terminally ill people. We had the most wonderful staff. We took such good care of our patients. Nobody got better care. And if the families wanted to come in, we bring them in and we put blankets on the floor and we make beds for them. We had a little kitchen. We cook for them or have them cook for us. Or it was an absolutely marvelous place to be. But anyway, this woman, I go in there and I see her, and um, I just felt like I knew her, though we've never met. So yeah, we called it a car wash. We would get, I was the RN and I would have a nursing assistant, and we tidy up our patient and we clean them and change the bedding, do what we needed to do, reposition them. I'd be giving them medication, and together we could get them cleaned up really quick. And then we go on to the next room and we do all 10 patients and then stop and do a little charting and then start again. So I had just left this woman and repositioned her. She looked really comfortable. She didn't respond verbally at all. When I would touch her, she would moan or something like that, react a bit. Somebody down the hallway needed something extra. So as I was going down the hallway, and I look into each room as I walk down the hallway, making sure everybody's okay. And I go by this woman's room, and she's sitting up on the side of the bed. And it's like, her legs hanging there, the side rails down. She looked fabulous. I looked at her and thought, I'm doing good. And then I keep walking down the hallway. And then I stop and think, wait a minute. I was just in her room like 20 minutes ago, and she's totally non responsive. What's she doing sitting up on the side of the bed? So I'm taking some steps backwards. It's like, what's going on here? And I look in the room, and she's back in bed flat. The side rails are up, and she has it sounded like agonal breathing. And as you get closer and closer to death, all the muscles kind of relax, and the breathing sounds different. It's not really bad. And yeah, she's back the way she was just a few, 20 minutes ago. And then I noticed when I had just prior changed her, she only had one leg. One of her legs had long since been amputated right at the hip a long time ago because the wound was well healed. When I walked by and she was sitting at the side of the bed, she had two legs. And this woman's in her 70s. And when I saw her with the two legs, she looked like she was 30. Her hair was she just came out of the salon, it was hanging down. She was smiling this huge smile. Oh, I got goosebumps. Ooh.
Me
And
too.
she just looked fabulous. And now she's like that old lady dying in bed. And I just looked at her, I thought, you're getting ready to go. You just showed me your soul. She just shared with me her soul while she's still alive. And I said, well, go for it. You're ready. You know what you're doing. Uh, Go. This is the place to be. It's a house of death. It's a hospice inpatient unit. And thank you. Thank you for showing me that. Oh my God, I almost cried. I probably did cry. It's like, what a wonderful blessing that she shared with that to me. So I ran down and got we had an LPN and a nursing assistant. I said, this is what I just saw. And they're thinking, oh, that's great. That's cool because they're seeing stuff too. So anyway, the rest of the shift, she made it through the shift. Everything was fine. And I get in my car and I go home. And I open the front door and I'm going down my hallway. And there she is standing in my hallway, completely solid, 100% solid, and young and gorgeous. And her hair's like wavy and she's smiling. It looked like she was wearing a robe or something. And I just said, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for showing me this. Why me? I don't know. And then she just slowly faded away. So I run to the phone and I called work and I said, the lady in room two, she just died. They go, no, we were just in there. She's still here. I said, go check again. And they put the phone down and they go in the room and they had just repositioned her and cleaned her up. And they came back, oh, she had just died. It's like, I know she was here in my hallway. It's like, oh my gosh. And everybody was, cheering this on because, we're all into this. what an amazing gift this woman gave me. And I don't know her. I mean, maybe at some other level I knew her or something, maybe a past life. I don't know. But I saw her soul before and after death. What a, wow. I have shared that story so many times. That was like a quarter century ago. I think about her almost every single day. Thank you. That was like that was like winning the lottery for me. That to get to share that, and she's gorgeous, and she had two legs. The missing leg was back.
That was an incredible gift that she gave you, and it shows that uh, maybe space distance doesn't really exist the way we think of it, because I'm sure she had never been to your home before when she was well, and she showed up in your home. So it was you, it was your energy that she connected with, and it didn't matter where you were.
And yeah, I would imagine she had family or friends or someone, but she showed herself to me, and twice. Twice. I never saw her after that. I never tried calling her up or anything like that. It was like, thank you, like spirit. It just gave me a great big birthday cake. Happy birthday. That's what it felt like. Wow, that was life changing. That was absolutely life changing. And what validation that what goes on in the physical body doesn't necessarily go on in the spirit body. And I worked trauma and saw people just mangled, and the spirit just goes on absolutely untouched by any of it. It just continues. What a marvelous experience. I had something happen when I was a little boy, and I was probably about 12 years old. I guess that's not too little. And we went to this tiny little church not too far from our house. And we were living in a real city. We had indoor plumbing. It was wonderful. And we would go to the church. It was like 15 miles away. And it was all cornfields and cows. So we're driving to church. And I'm looking out the window, and there's something up on the side of the road. What's that? That's different. And it looked like a person standing on a pile of dirt. As we're getting closer and closer and closer, it's my buddy Lee from church. I was about 12. He was probably around 16, 17. And, we would kind of hang around each other at Sunday school. And I tell my dad, slow down, slow down. There's Lee. He's standing on the side of the road. We drive right by. My dad said, I didn't see anything. And my mom said, I didn't see anything. And along the side of the road, there was like a ditch and then a little tiny hill. And then it was all cornfields. And the little tiny hill was to keep the water from rushing into the roads. In the Midwest, we got a lot of rain. I said, well, there's Lee. And Dad's looking in the rear view mirror. I don't see anything. So we get to church. It was a tiny little Methodist church. And we see Lee's parents, and they're crying. And I go to Sunday school, and Lee's not there. And so we did our whole church service. And at the end of the service, the minister said, let's say a prayer for Lee's parents. Lee hasn't come home for a couple of days. We don't know what happened. Let's hope for a good return, safe return for Lee. And my mom looks at me. She goes, "Don't say anything." She wants to cause trouble. So as soon as the service is over, I run up to his mom and say, "I saw Lee on the way to church. I saw him on the side of the road. I told my dad to stop, and he just drove on by." Well, now they're mad at my folks, saying, "Why didn't you stop and help my son?" And both my parents said, "Well, we didn't see him." So they said, "Well, let's follow you back." And David, you point out where he was. Well, I was hoping I could, because everything's corner cows, corner cows. There was no landmark. I hope he was still there. So we're driving back to our small town. Lee's parents are in the car behind us, and we're driving, and there's Lee again. I see him now. He's on the other side of the road. We're heading back, and he's standing there. I tell my dad, slow down, slow down. There's Lee, there's Lee. Go right by. So I didn't see anything. So I opened the car door. I say, "Oh, I'll go. I'll show you where he is." And my dad's mad and stops the car. And I get out of the car, And I'm running back to where I'm seeing Lee. My parents didn't see him. Lee's parents didn't see him. I see him clear as a bell. And he was wearing a black pants, nice slacks, black shoes, a white shirt, black belt. And he's standing on this little hill, just looking out at the horizon. He didn't turn his head. He didn't look at cars. He didn't try to wave anybody down. He just stood there staring off at the horizon. I run back and I'm standing on the road in front of Lee and have to look up at him a little bit because it's on like a 4-foot hill. I kept saying, Lee, your parents are looking for you. Here they come. And my parents and Lee's parents are running up and confused because they don't see anything. I see Lee standing there completely solid. And I'm thinking, what's going on? And they're looking and saying, who are you talking to? What are you talking about? There's no one there. And I keep saying, here he is. Here's Lee. And my dad was taller than I was. And the ditch, it was about 4 feet wide from the side of the road to this little hill that Lee was standing on, was filled with weeds because we got so much rain. My dad could see down in the weeds and saw the handlebar of something. He goes, what's this? And he's pulling the weeds back and obvious it was a motorcycle handlebar. Ends up Lee, against his parents' wishes, 2 days prior, bought a motorcycle. And my dad's pulling the weeds back. And I could see down there, there was somebody laying in the weeds in the ditch. And my dad said, it's Lee. He's gone. So his mom, standing just to the left of me, she passes out. She falls down on the side of the road. And her husband's helping her, and my dad's pulling and pulling and pulling, trying to pull the motorcycle up and trying to free Lee's body. It's just too late. He's probably been there a couple of days. So my dad's pulling the body. Lee, I'm still seeing Lee, clear as a bell, standing there, just looking over our heads, looking out at the horizon. And I turned to look at the mom, who really hit the pavement pretty bad. And I hear Lee say, I'm sorry, Mom. And I wasn't looking at him when he said it. I was looking at his mother. And I said to her, I said, Lee says, I'm sorry, Mom. And when I turned back to him, he's no longer talking. He, again, just staring out at the horizon and not looking at any of us. And by then, other cars are stopping and they start helping my dad. My dad's, past his knees in mud and trying to free Lee's body. So, they tell me just go get in the car. And I ended up sitting there for like an hour. And finally, someone got the sheriff and we get in the car and go back home. It was pretty much an uneventful day. Seeing a spirit, it's not that unusual in our family. Of course, we felt bad about Lee, but this was see spirits all the time. Um, that evening, there's a knock at the door, and it's the sheriff and like two other deputies or something, police official, and they wanted to talk to me. Well, sure, what can I tell you? And they're asking all these questions, and they're being really rude with me. They didn't believe for a minute that I saw Lee's spirit, in the cornfield. They thought I had killed Lee, and that's why I knew where his body was. It's like, how would I kill Lee? I was 12. I had a rickety old bicycle. I mean, could I have rode it out in the middle of nowhere in a cornfield and ran him off the road with a bicycle? That's crazy. But that's what they thought. And they came back two more times. And finally, my parents put up a buffer. They wouldn't let them talk to me. Um, so anyway, it was my parents went to his funeral. I didn't go. And we returned to church. It was then probably 2 weeks later. And it was obviously we were not welcome. Um, Lee's parents wouldn't speak to my parents. Nobody in the church would actually look at us, would look at my parents, but they would give me really bad looks, real dirty looks. And his mom would just look at me and just scowl. You could tell that they were blaming me. I'm the one that found the body. You know, I'm the one that gave her son's final message. I think he wanted the body to be found. I think he knew I would find it. So my folks had me get in the car again, and the minister was talking to my parents, and they came out to the car and says, "Well, we're not coming back." So I don't know if we were asked not to come back or they decided not to come back, but we never did go back. And Lee was in a farming community. I lived in a farming community. In the farming community, people touched in with each other. So all through high school, I was blamed for Lee's death, and the other kids would slam me up against the locker and say, "That's for Lee. That's for Lee. What'd you do to our buddy Lee?" All through high school. And as soon as I graduated, I left that town. My parents moved. We never went back. So that was over 50 years ago. Last August, I had my 50th high school reunion, and I never went to any of them before because I didn't want to be around those people. But this one, I thought I should go back. Well, it ends up a week before my high school reunion, I got a call that I was officially uninvited to my high school reunion because people still blamed me for Lee's death. And several of my old classmates were trying to locate distant family members to see if they could reopen this case. Because how else could I have known exactly where Lee's body was? They still think I am the perpetrator of his death. And so this happened like 55 years ago, and they're still blaming me. But I feel blessed. I feel I was chosen. I could see him. I pointed out his body. I gave him his mom his final message. And to me, it was just all positive. Some of my classmates believe me, some don't.
The
And that,
important thing is that you know the truth.
yeah,
And without you, who knows how long he could have been
yeah,
there, his body.
yeah,
He was waiting for someone to find him, and you were the one that did it. So, yeah, it's a blessing that you were
yeah.
able to see him and bring closure to his parents because otherwise they wouldn't know.
They wouldn't have known because that was probably spring or summer, and they wouldn't mow the weeds till winter, and so they wouldn't have found anything until then. So interesting how some people react positively to this. Some people have experiences throughout their lives somewhere where they know that there's more than what's on the physical. And you would think my classmates, after half a century, would have, had some personal touch with spirit. Many people do, some do now and then, and it seems others just are oblivious to it.
They really are. If you haven't experienced a spiritual experience,
Yeah,
it's hard to comprehend. It really truly is. It's beyond your scope of thinking. You can't think in that dimension. So you feel like anything like that doesn't truly exist. And I was there, you know. I've
yeah.
been there before. It doesn't sound like you were ever there before, so you may not understand, but I have been, and then I had spiritual experiences, so my mind was expanded. And now, the sky's the limit. Who knows what's possible?
When I was a new nurse, the only job in town was high risk labor and delivery, OBGYN labor and delivery. And that was the last place I wanted to be, especially for a man. Generally, pregnant women do not want, especially a new grad nurse in there. I mean, you're just terrified. And after a while, I got used to it. But I worked for Indian Health Services, and many of our clients were lived on the reservations and had very poor prenatal care. So we had many fetal demises there, and very difficult deliveries. But it was interesting in labor and delivery. I would go into the room, and not always, but at times, I could actually see the soul that was about to take, that was about to inhabit the birth of that the body of the child about to be born. And it looked like a kind of a circle with sparks, lots and lots of sparks. And it was up in the corner of the room. And of course, working in labor and delivery, you don't have time to be looking anywhere else. But now and then I would see it, and I could feel it. I could feel this energy and this hope and joy and love and happiness and anticipation. It was I was getting the fallout of the feeling of that spirit about to come into earth. And how bizarre that I started off labor and delivery seeing, a soul come into the world, and then later become a hospice nurse and see soul going out of the world. Got goosebumps again. And so often I would see that. And then as we would deliver the baby, very often, it was like a zip. It was like a zip that oval light would come towards the body and disappear, probably go right into it. Sometimes it was a few minutes later, sometimes it was hours later, and sometimes I could feel it and see it in the corner of the room. And after we had delivered the baby, and mom's goes one way, and we would have to take the baby to the nursery. We had NICU, intensive care, because so many of these kids were so sick. Um, I don't know when the soul finally went into it, or did it. I don't know if that baby survived or not. It's so many fetal demises. Um, but what a blessing that was. Maybe 20% of the babies, I got to see that. I got to. Why? Why did I get to share that? Uh, on the other ones I didn't see, did the baby come in earlier? Was it just not chosen for me to be the witness to that particular spirit? Just an absolutely amazing, wonderful blessing that I had in my life to get to experience that. And I shut my eyes, I can see them right now. Uh, Beautiful experience. Um,
So, would you say that the soul does not enter the body until the body's been born?
um, Probably 80% of our deliveries, I didn't see anything. So I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't allowed to. Maybe they were there and I just didn't. Maybe I was in an off day. Maybe they were already in the body. I don't know. I don't know when. But the ones that I saw, it was within moments of the birth of the body, the newborn baby, that I saw that zip going down in there. And then a few of them, it just hovered there. It hovered there. I would be, after we did the delivery, I mean, generally, we're out of that room because we got other things to do, but it would be there maybe for hours. So whatever happened, I don't know. When we had stillbirths, we generally knew, unless we called them hack and slash. That's terrible to say, C-sections, because people would come in and just urgent. I mean, we had 4 or 5 minutes to get the baby out, and we would just do emergency C-sections. And I forget where I was going with that. And other ones, hopefully we had more time and try to do a more natural delivery. So it's interesting. What would make the difference of what time that the soul goes into the body? And then other times in NICU, newborn intensive care unit, I could see it not as bright as just before delivery, but it would be like around the body, maybe within 7, 8 feet, maybe 15 feet. Is it necessarily stuck in the body, or is the soul just got a tether and can kind of roam around a little bit? Does it need to be actually in the physical body, or is just in the vicinity? Does the soul have that freedom? I'm thinking it does. I'm thinking it doesn't necessarily have to be in the body. And of course, people like you that have had out of the body experiences, in me, we know that we're still connected. It's just we don't necessarily always have to be in the same place at the same time, spirit and physical body. Working in the emergency room, and we were level 1 trauma, so we got all the bad traumas. Level 1's is the most intense, and I worked at actually a couple different hospitals in the ERs in that setting. So we would get people wait till the last minute to have a baby, and we would get so many people didn't know they were pregnant, and they come in with my stomach hurts or something, and bing bang boom, we're laying a newborn baby on their stomach that they didn't know that they were having. But even there in the ED, um, where generally I didn't see a whole lot just because it is so busy. When we were about to do a delivery, even there I saw them. I don't know. There's something about me and soul about to come into the body or about to leave it. Whatever it is, I'm open to it. It's just natural for me to see it, and it's almost always I see it in the upper left. I can see him right now. If I could draw, I would draw a picture of what the newborn soul looks like. It doesn't look like a person. It's kind of interesting. It looks kind of like a halo. And you think of old religious photos, holy people had a halo. Honestly, it looked like that, but a little more oval. So I had a wonderful experience in the ED. Again, usually I don't see things there, but we had this guy. This isn't near death. Hope it's okay to go into this. This was a wonderful experience. And so he was on a motorcycle, had a motorcycle accident, and survived it. He was torn up. And we were anticipating him coming in, and you could tell by the call if a patient was going to live or not. And if they weren't, we went ahead and put a body bag on the slab that we had in our trauma bay, and we had 4 of them, so we could do. If we had staff, we could do 4 traumas at the same time. They brought the guy in, we coded him, he was just torn up, and we did everything we couldn't save him. So he died. And it's interesting in a real life code. I don't know, on TV, it's not like that. As soon as someone dies, everybody leaves. The doctors leave, the nurses leave, the technicians leave. There's 10 people working on this person. As soon as the code's called, they take off the protective gear and they walk away. And then we have a crew to take care of the body. Generally has to go to the medical examiner for an autopsy. So I was kind of hanging around. I don't know what I had to do. Everybody else was gone. The body still sitting on the slab. And up to the right side of this person, this man, I saw looked like drinking straws, maybe about 18 feet long, like beams of light, white light all around. It was the form of a woman, and I didn't see her, but I saw this light coming from around her. And she would go up to the slab and put her hands down, stomp her hands down, and then walk away like 2 or 3 steps and come back. And it looks like she was shouting. Her arms were shouting, and she was like bending around, like looking for help. And I didn't hear anything. I didn't. I felt fear, panic, um, confusion kind of coming from this person. I've never seen anything like that before. It was just the light around her body. It's obvious a female figure, though I could see right through her. I couldn't see anything, just the light. And I was just wondering, is this a spirit? Because, coming up to the slab, maybe she had died on the slab, because we had thousands of people die on these slabs over the years. And we lost so many people. I didn't know what it was. So I just tried to quiet myself, wrote, as much as I could in the emergency room and just kind of feel what's going on. And it truly was someone here for that man. And it just panic, 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 help me, help me, help me, panic. And what is this? And I could see it was like someone was showing me the accident scene and this man laying on the side of the road, his motorcycle. But there was somebody else like over this tiny little hill. And the police were still there for this accident. And I know there was police still on the scene. And I went up to one of the policemen. I said, was this the only man in the accident? He said, well, yeah, it was just a lone rider. Are you sure there was nobody else? Could there have been somebody on the back of the seat with him? And he said, well, we didn't see anything. There's nothing reported. I said, if there's still officers on scene, would you have them look around the area and see if maybe somebody else was with this rider? Oh my God, I got goosebumps. This was so cool. And he said, well, I guess we could. And he gets on his walkie-talkie thing, and there is still somebody on scene. So have him look around. There might be a little hill or something. There could be somebody on the other side of the hill. He never got back to me, but all at once there was this big panic, and I heard the officers later on talking. There was a woman on the back of the motorcycle with this guy, and when they crashed, she flew in the air. There was a little tiny hill, and her body was on the other side of the little hill, and they just didn't look. And I can understand it, and I don't blame them. And they were probably afraid that I was going to say, oh, you stupid people, why didn't you look? And I wouldn't do that. I mean, if I saw someone on a motorcycle and a person on the side of the road, that's probably all I would think too. But it ends up there was a woman and she was killed instantly. He lived and made it, at least to our hospital and died. And I just wonder, could her spirit in panic, attached to her boyfriend or whoever he was that was still alive, and follow him to the emergency room where he died, and now she's there. That was bizarre. That was amazing. I think of that so much. What do you think of that?
I think it's amazing. Yeah, I think you have such amazing gifts to be able to discern the spiritual world from the physical world. And who knows, maybe that world is more physical than this one. I don't even know. But you do have some gifts, I'll tell you that much. And I have a question for you, and I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you afraid of death?
No, 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 no. I'm anticipating it. And especially, yeah, 9 weeks ago, I had a major stroke and I fell and I knocked my teeth out, several of my teeth. And I was paralyzed and I couldn't speak and half my body didn't move. And I went to ICU and it was weird to be a patient on the floor where I used to be a nurse. And I'd worked on that floor for years. And I had taken care of patients in the very room where I am now the patient. I'm the care receiver versus, 42 years of being the caregiver. And my concern was lingering. I didn't want to linger. I'm okay. I am ready to move on to that next glorious step. I've had glimpses of it, and it's absolutely beautiful. And a whole new paradigm, a whole new way of thinking and consciousness, and you just leave the crap behind and you go on. So yeah, I did my meditations and I did my healing. If I'm going to be here on earth, I want to be the highest functioning level possible. But if not, I'm ready to go. Absolutely ready to go. Just don't want it painful. Don't want it messy. No one does. What about you?
Like, yeah, I'm not. I was before 20 years before, but
Mhm.
since my experiences happened and the well, my husband died, and I started having out of body experiences almost immediately after. And I feel with all my heart he was reaching across the veil to show me that he's okay. 'Cause I was devastated. I needed to know that he was okay.
Right.
And I experienced some of the most incredible experiences I didn't even know could be possible. I've never heard of a near death experience or an out of body experience before that. And it opened up my world and started my spiritual journey. So um, it took me a couple years to actually start to really understand that death doesn't really exist. It doesn't, and I'm not afraid.
Have you seen him? Has he come back to the
It
point?
I've I've not seen him like in my physical
Uh-huh.
life, but in dreams,
Mhm.
and they're not normal dreams. They're visitation dreams. They just feel different.
You know what? When you communicate with spirit, and my grandmother taught me this as a child. I mean, she told me when I want to communicate with spirits, she would say, never use words, never use your voice, never talk to them with your mouth. And when you communicate with them, don't use words, use feelings, use pictures, use colors, use moods, because we have physical brains and we have physical mouths that we think with and talk with. They don't. You know, the brain and the mouth is, it's gone in a box in the ground. It's buried. They have a consciousness and an awareness. So to communicate with spirit, we we shouldn't ask them to step down to our level to communicate. We need to step up to their level and and to speak with feelings and emotions. And if you want to ask a spirit a question, don't put it in words. Send a picture, send um, a feeling. But stuff that happened on Earth, very often they're just not interested in anymore. So it's the connection, it's the love you get to touch in with. I had that with my two sons were run over in my front yard. They were playing in the front yard, and a drunk driver decided that was more important than for me to get to be a dad. And they were 7 and 9, and they died together. And there was a whole incredible story. In fact, I told it in a video, but I shut down. I painted all the windows because I didn't want to see outside. I just didn't want to see anything, and I just sat in the house for a year. And one day they came back, and they came back. They're now just thinking about it, very similar to the spirits, the souls that I saw of the little babies about to be born, like sparklings, like sparklers. And they came back, and they, instead of daddy, daddy, we miss you, daddy, we love you, we wish we were there, instead of saying that, they told me off. They sounded like they were in their upper 20s, well educated executives. And they're saying, we got work to do. This is very important work that we're doing, and you're interfering. You're holding us back, and we're not going to have it anymore. You cannot do this to us one more day. We've had it. We're through with this. Um, and they kept taking turns telling me off. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, it was like a mean cop pulled me over and was telling me off. I'm saying, well, I'm sorry, sir. I had no idea I was holding you back. I love you. I miss you so much. And he kept saying, that's no excuse. This is very important what we're doing where we are now. Very important. It's for the good of everyone, and you're messing it up. You're holding it back. You. I They told me off. I was like I was pulled into HR and in trouble about being fired. And I'm just saying, I'm sorry. The only one nice thing one of them said, and again, they were 7 and 9 when they died. They sounded like they were 27, 28 years old. Very expressive, very well educated. Is one of them said, we appreciate what you did. That was the nicest thing they said. And then they continued telling me off and say, well, this is it. You need to back off, and you need to back off now. And the little thousands of lights just started getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it disappeared. And it's like, oh my gosh. Um, and right then and there, I got showered and cleaned up. I had to get someone to come jump my car because I hadn't started it in a year. And I went to the nearest hospital where I used to work, and they hired me back. And I started work the next day after sitting in the house for a solid year. And then I had to scrape all the paint off the windows and let the light back in. The light's there always. You can shut your eyes, you can turn your back towards it, you can ignore it, you can pretend it's not there. The light of God, the light of Spirit is always there, whether you see it or not. It's loving you, it's uplifting you, whether you accept it or not. And to finally get to that place to say, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot and I'll start looking. And the more you look and the more you participate with the light, the more that flows through. And like what you're doing with your channel, you're channeling the light. You're channeling the light for others. It's not what you pull towards yourself that gives you the gifts, it's what you give for others. That's the gift. And the more you give, the more you get. And the more you love, the more you become a magnet for love. The battery never runs down. And I learned that through nursing. I learned that through my experiences with spirit. Uh, and I changed from being a technical nurse after my children died. I became a hospice nurse. And like you, it's a chance to change your paradigm. I'm sorry for what happened that you went through, but you've turned this into such a positive thing to uplift and help others.
Well, you also, I don't even want to try to imagine what you had to go through. But I think that they do want us to heal and let them go, not to hang on to them. The love never goes away, but not to dwell in the pain. I think it does hinder them. I have had some communication from my husband that it wasn't pleasant, or I was causing some sort of unpleasantness in some way or another by being so sad and by holding on, and I had to let him go. He would never go away, but I had to let what happened go. And they do want us to do that, and they want us to heal, and they want us to be better, because really the only thing is love, and that's just never going to disappear. And we can mourn and we can be sad and angry and upset, but in the end, we have to continue on with our lives. And the only way to do that is to let it go.
Right, right. And to grow from it.
Exactly.
To grow from it. Yeah. You got to grow every single day. There's an illusion. I'm old now, and stuff starting to finally make sense. And you know, vast spiritual wisdom, I think, can be, if you can't say it in one sentence, it's probably not spiritual wisdom. It's simple. And there's an illusion thinking you can just stand still. If you stand still, you're actually going backwards. The whole universe is progressing. Um, Love and life is getting, yeah, unfolding and going to higher spiritual levels. You need to do something positive every single day in your life. This thing about doing a kind deed every day, it's not just to be sweet, it's keeping you in pace. And you know every single day you got to do something positive just to keep up. And if you want to really progress with the spiritual life, you know read wonderful things, turn the TV off, turn the negativity off, and focus on that which really is eternal. Everything else that's not eternal is just distraction. Right.
Definitely. Every day we have lessons to learn. Every day when we wake up in the morning, be grateful, learn your lessons. And I am grateful that you were here with me today. And I want to ask if my viewers wanted to reach out to you, how would they find you?
I started a channel called Uncle Dave's Kitchen, and it was going to be a cooking show. And so far, I haven't even made a biscuit yet. But yeah, I'm getting older and my health is changing. So I'm making videos on some of my spiritual events I've had in my life. So Uncle Dave's Kitchen at YouTube.
Awesome. And do you have any last words of wisdom for my viewers?
Um, it's not what you get, it's what you give. And we have, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what goes on in your life, you have two incredible, powerful tools always at your hand. And one is attitude and one is attention. You may not be able to change your situation. You may not be able to change what's going on in your life, but you can change the attitude that you have about that condition. And you can always change where you place your attention. You can place your attention on what eats you, or you can place your attention on what feeds you. And you can change that attitude and attention at any second.
Love that. Thank you so much, David. And I hope the very best for you always.
Thanks, everybody. Glad you watched.